There are a lot of different ways to play through Skyrim. Some people like magic, others prefer attacking from a distance with a bow and arrow, and others still charge headfirst into combat with a sword in each hand. But there are some items in the game that aren't really meant to be the main method of attack. Can you beat Skyrim with only a torch? I'm skipping the opening ride into Helgen because it was a glitchy nightmare just like it was in my last Skyrim video. I chose an Imperial for reasons I'll explain in a bit, ignored Alduin, and made my way inside Helgen Keep. Just like with my fork and shout videos, when I say with only a torch, what I mean is that I can only do damage to enemies with a torch. I can still wear armor, use spells to heal myself, and use shouts that don't affect enemies. A few minutes in, and I already found my first torch. Sort of. There are two kinds of torches in Skyrim. There are torches that are items, and those that are part of the environment, meaning they're fixed in place like a door or a wall. As I made my way through the keep, it became annoyingly clear that finding a torch to wield as a weapon would be harder than I thought. I let Ralof and his friends do all the work since I can't really do anything, ran past a bear, escaped Helgen, and activated the Warrior Stone. It had never dawned on me that Bleak Falls Barrow was just a little ways up a mountain from the stones, so I went ahead and discovered that location to save myself some time down the line. In Riverwood, I took advantage of Gerdur by taking everything she had to her name, then went inside Riverwood Trader to buy a torch from Lucan. For some reason, I thought it was common for merchants to sell torches, but the one time I actually want a torch, there aren't any for sale, which means I'm completely defenseless, again. I also checked a few nearby buildings for any torches that I might be able to steal, but there was nothing. The small upside is that Whiterun is only a short hike and a few wolf bites away. I persuaded the guards to let me in, checked with the weapon vendor for some reason and found no torches, made my way inside Dragon's Reach, and gave the Jarl the rundown on what happened in Helgen. Farengar, the court wizard, didn't have any torches either. So I did what I hate doing and resorted to the Skyrim wiki to figure out where exactly I could find a torch. There are a few torches in the dungeons beneath Dragon's Reach. The only problem is getting in. It took a few more attempts than it should have to get a guard to see me picking a lock, allowing me to go directly to jail, pick a lock in a loose grate on the floor, and get my first torch. There were actually a few torches in the dungeon. By the time I'd retrieved my possessions after spending the night in jail, I had 8 fire sticks to my name and was off to Bleak Falls Barrow to get the Dragonstone. Now that there's relevant footage to show in chronological order, I can explain a few things about the torches. The torch is held in one hand, but it's not a one-handed weapon. Using it to shield yourself from attacks raises the block skill, which is why I chose an Imperial as my race. They're one of 4 races that start with 20 in blocking, but they're also the only race to start off with 25 in restoration, which is incredibly useful since the torch is not a very useful weapon. A torch is not the least damaging weapon in Skyrim. It does more damage per attack than a fork does when you take burn damage into account. But the drawback is that because it's used as a shield, attacking with it drains stamina, which makes killing even a simple bandit a time-consuming endeavor. And to make matters worse, torches burn out after 4 minutes. If you don't put the torch away outside of combat, it'll burn out faster than you think. Inside Bleak Falls Barrow, I fought my way through a few bandits until I met up with a bandit outlaw, who took several minutes to kill. The very small upside is that your stamina doesn't need to be fully recharged to do a torch bash. A single point of stamina is enough to bash an enemy. Also, torches can't be used to clear out spiderwebs because why would they? So I had to use the same tactic from my shouts only video to cut Arvel down. I punched the webbing without damaging anything else, watched Arvel get bit by a skeever, lit him on fire, and retrieved the golden claw. For some reason, I thought portable fire would be effective against Draugr, but it sure as shit wasn't. After I accidentally set off a giant wooden cheese grater, I found another Draugr and did something I've never done before. Something I've avoided doing because I always felt like it would take away from the point of the video. But if any video calls for it, it's this one. I grinded my block skill for over an hour to get it up to level 50 because there's a perk that makes bashing do 5 times more damage. I found out later, as in after I captured all the footage for the video, that there are far better methods for leveling up block than what I did. At one point, I started playing around with the difficulty settings to see if it would have any impact on how quickly the skill leveled up. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I wasn't really paying much attention to the game during the hour or so I spent doing this. But, finally, after all that wasted time, I got block up to 50, unlocked the Deadly Bash skill, and wasn't all that impressed. It was certainly an improvement, but not the game changer I was hoping it'd be. With the amount of time I just spent dancing around with a single enemy, I didn't feel like fighting any more Draugr than I had to, so I ignored the Draugr on the way to the golden puzzle door, opened it, killed the one Draugr that interrupted my spelling lessons, and there was only one thing between me and the rest of the game: the Draugr Overlord. He was significantly harder to kill than the Bandit Outlaw, but not that challenging. The Power Bash staggers an opponent, giving you an opening to attack again. At one point he used his noodle and retreated to the water in an attempt to put a nail in the coffin that is my only method of attack, but it didn't work. The Overlord fell to my sparkler. I got the Dragon Stone, returned it to Hrothgar, and the Jarl was pretty rude to me. Someone said something about a dragon. I was interrupted by a courier and found a Whiterun guard who witnessed the dragon attack. The dragon arrived, and I didn't do all that much. It was too far away and would take too long to get to it, but I made sure I landed the killing blow so I could gloat about how I killed the dragon. I then screamed as loudly as I could, informed the Jarl of how cool I am, checked with pocket fire one more time for anything useful, returned the golden claw to Big Nose, and began making my way to High Hrothgar. I found a small bandit camp as I ventured towards the mountain, and I thought I'd raise my block skill a little more since this guy attacked so quickly. Then I realized that his attacks did so little damage that I could actually stand there and get sliced over and over again without having to worry too much about my health. I did that for a solid 20 minutes. To be honest, that was probably a waste of time. My heavy armor skill leveled up a few times, but that was about it. But while I was experiencing this glitchy, I did some research into a much more important topic. There are items that exist in Skyrim that, when combined in a fireproof vessel of some sort and heated over a period of time, can break down and form brand new items. This technique is commonly referred to as cooking. The cooking creation I was after was called vegetable soup, because it restores 1 point of health and 1 point of stamina per second for 12 real-life minutes. Having ushered in a new age of technological advancement, I spent 15 minutes marching towards High Hrothgar and made essentially no progress because I was on the wrong side of the mountain. So I returned to the Whiterun farmlands, stole some crop, and took the proper path towards the castle in the sky. I torch-bashed a few bandits at a small camp just outside the farmland, made 5 more bowls of vegetable soup with a special blood bandit sauce, spent a few minutes running through the jungle, stole some cabbage from Ivarstead, got a package from Krillin, and began making my way up the horizontal stone ladder embedded in the mountain. I arrived, passed Oranger's test, got Master Ernie's special orange sauce, and sprinted through a gate to almost pass their silly little test. All that's left is to retrieve the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. But before that, I returned to Dragon's Reach, avoided the donkey's vile gaze, looked for more vegetables and found none, checked the local market and again found none, examined this large soup bowl and got interrupted by cultists, tried to drop a bucket down the well but it was too big, then I tried to drop a scroll down the well, but that wouldn't go either. The cultists got themselves offed by city security. I put on one of their faces and began making my way to Ustengrov. With the exception of nearly being mauled to death by a kitty and the dragon that wouldn't leave me alone, not much happened on the way out there. There were a few nefarious foes above the entrance to Ustengrov, but they went down without much of an issue. I collected a few plants from the area because I'm a farmer now, entered Ustengrov, ignored most of the Draugr and bandits inside as I made my way deeper into the dungeon, parkoured on some tables, found a little waterfall, learned a new word, and killed a skeleton. There was a large spider in the next room, but just like with the first one I encountered, I pretended it didn't even exist, pulled the chain, and didn't find the horn. I took the note the thief left in its place, dropped it into the water so no one would ever find it, left Ustengrov, and returned to High Hrothgar to hand over the horn. Then I remembered that I didn't have it, went back to Riverwood, stole a few cabbage, met Delphine, and went down into her sex dungeon. Now that I actually had the horn, I returned to High Hrothgar for real this time. Gave the horn to the old men. They learned me a new word, then shouted at me in their native tongue. But my shaft was firmly in my grasp, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get me off my feet. Because soup is inevitable, I made more at the cookery in Dragon's Reach, fast traveled to Ivarstead, ran with the bears, and was off to the dragon reanimation station. Sometime later, I arrived in Kynesgrove, kidnapped a few plants, and met up with Delphine to slay the dragon. It was here I learned just how useful vegetable soup really is. Recall, if you will, what I said earlier about bashing with the torch. All it takes is a single point of stamina to do any kind of bash. and the soup restores 1 point of stamina per second, which means the torch is now just as useful as any other weapon. More so, in fact, because the power bash is powerful enough to stagger a dragon. Constantly power bashing essentially means that the enemy doesn't have a chance to attack you back, and because of the effectiveness of soup, this can be done indefinitely, as long as you remember to unequip and re-equip the torch before the 4 minutes is up. The dragon was slain with a torch. Delaware explained that her plan was for me to sneak into the Thalmor embassy. I went ahead and discovered the Windhelm stables, and met up with Cunt back at Riverwood for more details about my infiltration mission. I arrived, she said like 3 words, and I was back on the road again. I sold a few things to Lucan before heading to Solitude by way of Ustengrov. I entered the Beaver building and gave what I could to Malborn, mostly just armor, torches, and my special soup. I got my costume from Delphine at the farm down the road, rode to the party, convinced someone to cause a distraction, retrieved my supplies, and let the ruthless murderer in me out of her cage. The Thalmor soldiers are, predictably, tougher than your run-of-the-mill bandits and wilderness creatures, but the power bash still staggers them, and the soup still lets me beat them with a fire stick damn near infinitely. The only problem with the torch bash is that for some reason, and maybe it's just because I was pretending to be a peasant by playing with a controller, my view would drift slightly to the right as I attacked. It wasn't a huge deal or anything, but it was an annoyance. Inside Ellenwind Solar were more elves to slaughter. The only real problem in here was the Flame Atronach, because its attacks did a sizable amount of damage. Once everyone inside was dead, I found the diary I was after, went down to the torture chamber, slow roasted the prisoner while he was chained to a wall, found more books, killed the Thalmor invaders rather quickly, escaped via the reeking cave, and returned to Delphine's secret chamber to be tortured by her very existence. After I'd gotten my stuff back, I sold what I could to Lucan again, and plotted a course for Riften. The journey to the southeast was colorful, but not very exciting. Once I'd gotten inside Riften, I didn't even bother talking to Brynjolf, and went straight to the Ratway. The named NPCs down there took some time to kill, but for the most part, facing off against a single humanoid creature isn't much of a challenge anymore, due to the effectiveness of torch bashing. A few Thalmor had made their way into the Ratway as well, one of which came prepared with a torch of their own, but I dispatched of them all, met Esbern. He got stuck on a piece of wall for longer than I would have liked, but we got back through the Ratway. I left him in the dust when I fast traveled back to Riverwood, and he explained to me in stupid what his plan is: find Alduin's wall, and hopefully find a way to defeat him. Unfortunately, the special wall is on the west side of the map, and to make matters worse, a dragon crossed paths with me about halfway to Karthspire, and followed me most of the way there. I ignored all the forsworn and other unpleasantness upon my arrival and entered Karthspire, where I let my torch-bearing companions do most of the work, because I was feeling pretty lazy at the time. I cut myself because nobody understands how stressful it is to be the Dragonborn. Entered the Skyhaven Temple, got myself a set of Blades armor, listened to an old man ramble on about nonsense, and went to talk to the old mountain men about learning a new shout. They were hesitant to help me, but they eventually came around. I made my way up the mountain and met Parthenax. This is the first instance in this particular playthrough where the main quest cannot be continued unless a creature is damaged by something other than a torch. But after seeing the comments on other videos that had similar situations, I'm gonna go ahead and say that it doesn't disqualify a run if the game forces you to do it. So I blasted Parthenax with heat breath. He told me about the Dragon Run shout, and that I'd need the Elder Scrolls trademark to defeat Alduin. This time around, I paid 50 gold to get a ride to Winterhold, instead of dragging my ass out there myself. In Winterhold, I remembered that I still had to talk to someone about an Elder Scroll before I could gain entrance. So I spoke to one of the old men in the stone temple, returned to Winterhold, entered the College of Winterhold, asked an orc about an Elder Scroll. He presented a book that was worthless, and told me about Septimus Cygnus, who lives in the Land of Ice to the north. I used the Become Unreal Engine 3 shout to take a shortcut from the college to the water, got attacked by a snowcat, and got the location of an Elder Scroll from Cygnus. I then backtracked to Winterhold and went on a mountain climbing adventure until I eventually arrived at Alfton, where I immediately left for Whiterun to make more vegetable soup. With enough soup to last more than 5 hours, I entered Alfton to begin the search for an Elder Scroll. The dwarven spiders inside were not impressed with my torch attacks, which made killing them not worth the amount of time it took. The axe-wielding kitty a bit deeper inside the ruins was defeated with the unexpected help of the robo-spiders. Because they're such a pain in the ass, I pretty much just ignored them and all other Dwemer shit as I progressed deeper into the Dwemer ruins. I fell farther than any Mitten squad has before thanks to the become ethereal shout. Ignored the Falmer infesting the lower levels because they're pretty tough and do a surprising amount of damage to me. Opened a secret passageway, spent a while beating and burning Umana, stole her clothes, and entered the mythical land of the giant jellyfish. There are places to go and things to see down here, but I don't have time for that. I pretended nothing else existed down there and made a beeline for the M-word tower, where I inserted the cube, solved the puzzle, got a few glamour shots of me standing in front of the Elder Scroll, retrieved the Elder Scroll, left the cube down there because Septimus doesn't deserve happiness, was finally done with all the boring Dwemer shit, went back to the Old Man Mountain, got my picture taken with a dragon, read the Elder Scroll at the Time Wound, and learned the Dragon Ren shout. The big bad dragon arrived, and it was time for the fight that's given me trouble in the past. I used Dragon Rend to force the beast to land, and began beating him mercilessly with my torch. It didn't do very much damage, but it didn't matter because the shout kept him on the ground. The torch bash did a solid amount of staggering, making his attacks infrequent, and the soup ensured that I could bash him indefinitely. It took several minutes of beating him, but with help from God, and by channeling my inner wannabe actress and animal abuser who spits on their dog, I was able to beat Alduin until he tucked his tail between his legs and took off for Sovngarde. Next came the challenge of actually getting to Sovngarde. Usually, I just go straight to the old man, but this time around, I went to the other old man and got his advice. He told me that I could trap a dragon in Dragon's Reach, but more importantly, he told me that Parthenax needed to die. I tried to kill him once before and failed, but this time it's different. This time I have the power of soup on my side. At the throat of the world, I used everything at my disposal to anger the dragon. He took to the sky and came back down to end me. This fight was more or less the same as the Alduin fight. The only difference is being that Parthenax was able to get off an attack more frequently. Not that it mattered, and it took such a long time that one of my torches actually burned out for the first time. With the ancient dragon now dead, I returned to Delphine to tell the Blades of my victory. Literally all she had to say was, "I knew we could count on you, glad to have you back on our side." I just killed the leader of the Greybeards, and her reaction was pretty much the same reaction my grandma had when I showed her my Nintendog. What a waste of time. But the wastes of time are not yet finished, because I had to spend 20 minutes talking to the Jarl of Whiterun about capturing a dragon, then convincing the leader of the Greybeards to hold the peace council, traveling to both ends of the country to persuade the leaders of both the Imperials and Stormcloaks to come to the council, and then sit through the council itself. I sided against the Empire at every opportunity, returned to Whiterun to trap the dragon, captured the dragon, and rode it to Skuldafn. There were a lot of dragons and Draugr between me and the portal to Sovngarde. I made great use of the Become Earl shout as I ignored the dragons on the way to the temple. I solved the first puzzle and spent a little while trying to kill the horde of Draugr that followed me inside. The normal Draugr went down without much issue, but the restless ones were a pain in the ass to kill, so much so that I eventually decided to just let them be and press deeper into the temple. The last significant obstacle between me and the great outdoors was the Draugr Overlord, but as I've said before, one-on-one fights aren't that difficult anymore. The Overlord fell before me. I took the diamond golden claw, opened the door, went outside, turned myself blue again, and jumped into the portal to Sovngarde. To get into the Hall of Valor, I had to prove myself to Sun. The staggering from my torch bash was less effective against him because of his size, but that issue seemed to solve itself when I hit him into the river and he fell down the waterfall. Unfortunately, he reappeared at the end of the bridge. With my permission slip signed, I entered the Hall of Heroes, spoke to the heroes inside, and with our best weapons in hand, we all went outside to clear the skies and battle Alduin for the last time. I used the Dragon Ren shout to keep him on the ground and began hitting him with my stick. This was far easier than either of the other two dragon fights, thanks to the fact that nothing glitched out and the torch bash kept him from attacking too often. I landed the final blow with my torch. The eternal evil of the World Eater was vanquished. I accidentally lit a Stormcloak soldier on fire. My companions killed him before I had a chance to say sorry. Sun sent me back to the land of the living, and I beat Skyrim with only a torch. And that's going to do it for this video about whether or not you can beat Skyrim with only a torch. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything, leave a like. Leave a dislike if you didn't enjoy the video or didn't learn anything. Join the Mitten Squad Discord server through a link in the video description. Follow me on Twitter @Mitten Squad. My name is Paul of Mitten Squad. Have a wonderful day.